Taxation. Well, joining us now is Maxwell Marlow, Director of Research at the Adam Smith Institute. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Hello.
So I find this particularly interesting. We spoke earlier about this mini-budget. I think that it was basically the right direction. She didn't brief people well enough. She hadn't laid the ground. You can argue whether Kwasi Kwarteng was the right Chancellor. But now she's back, and there is a core vote. There are core supporters in the Conservative Party who actually believe that Liz Truss is onto something here, that the Great British Growth Rally will be the one to watch. What do you think?
Well, regarding the mini-budget, I mean, I think I was in the Times yesterday arguing that, you know, she had made the right calls but executed them very, very poorly. And it was interesting when I read the opposition piece to mine that it was essentially the same argument. So I think there's kind of cross-political, consensus that growth is the most important factor for the British economy going forward. And I think it's going to be the same in the next election. I think for the rally, though, I think there's going to be difficulties. A lot of MPs are very sour about, a lot of Conservative Party MPs are very sour about what happened in the mini-budget, what the economic consequences were, and, you know, the knock-on effects that we see now. I mean, a lot of blame can be placed on the Bank of England, that's certainly true, but the kind of distrust in the British pound, the distrust in British markets, and kind of the rise of Rishi Sunak, it can really be laid at the door of that mini-budget. So I think it's going to be an interesting one to square at this pro-growth rally.
Well, we were talking about the highest tax burden in 70 years since the Second World War. We were talking about the rising corporation tax, that people have never been taxed so much. When I look back to that mini-budget, I think this is what Conservatives should stand for, which is low taxes. I was talking to Sir John Redwood about this. If you remember, in her mini-budget, she wanted to lower income tax. All of the studies show that actually if you move to a flat taxation across the board, you actually raise more revenue. Just taxing people for terrible public services doesn't seem to me to be very cogent.
Completely agree. It is the thing. We are at the as we and your listeners and viewers know, it is essentially that we have the highest tax rate, in the post-war period. It is inordinate in many ways that a Conservative government is still in place doing this. But it's not just the taxes. It's what those taxes are. It's stuff like stamp duty, which is a really big contributor to the housing crisis. Apart from it's also the massive amounts of planning that every single person trying to build anything from a house to an office to a factory has to go through. And it's why we're seeing a lot of the problems with HS2, is because this planning system doesn't work, and it contributes massively to the housing crisis. It contributes massively to our productivity problems, and we're some of the lowest productivity in the G7. That's very important to remember. And also contributes to our incredibly low investment, both in the public and the private sectors, which we've actually had since the 1950s, apart from some years under Thatcher. So a lot of people are saying, oh, this could be a new Thatcherite budget. Maybe, but I think this is a new way of looking at things. It was just executed really terribly.
So I said, in terms of what Rishi Sunak is doing, he's testing the waters. I think Labour is testing the waters as well. I think we've seen the poll lead narrowing now when he's talking about rowing back some of the rules over net zero. All of those, sort of the mood music seems to be changing. You've got Liz Truss doing that as well. I think one of the other things that we're talking about, and this is widely being talked about within Conservative circles, I'll ask Charlie in just a minute, but is inheritance tax. Again, we've heard this before. We'll abolish inheritance tax. That never happened. We're talking about it again. Is that the right way for the Conservative Party to go?
Well, look, I mean, inheritance tax is a very easy sell to the electorate. It is the most unpopular tax in Britain, even though it affects such a small amount of people. I think with the inheritance tax, I think there's something that a lot of people aren't talking about, though. The fact is that inheritance tax puts off a lot of foreign direct investment because people do not want to relocate here from wealthy countries. And let's remember that, since 2016, a lot of very rich people have left the country. A lot of entrepreneurs have. James Dyson, for example, relocated. I don't blame them given the tax rate, but that means a lot of people aren't coming into the country from really anywhere in the world, settling here, starting businesses here that can grow into big companies, employ tens of thousands of people, generate billions for GDP and for society, because that inheritance tax is in the way. And that's a really important thing to remember. I think we get lost with, passing down the house or passing on the pension pots. It's about foreign direct investment. It's a very clever thing. I think really we need policymakers to be looking at those smarter angles, and they're always free to call the Adam Smith Institute for a bit of help on this because we have the research.
Well, I was going to say, I'm not sure many MPs actually understand the nuances of this, and maybe they should give you a ring. It is also interesting, in the Telegraph this morning, Labour now plotting, as they call it, a devastating inheritance tax raid. So the Labour Party is planning essentially a multi-billion-pound inheritance tax raid, which will affect farmers and family businesses. So they want to scrap two exemptions. That is on agricultural and on business property relief. So, as you well know, if you are a farmer, you can pass the farm on free of inheritance tax. Also with businesses, you can do something similar. Now, that to me seems deeply unfair. If the vast majority of people who are paying inheritance tax have already paid tax, you've actually pushed yourself to buy a house. You're then that taxed again, and that's taken away. But if you're a farmer, that's OK. Now, Labour wants to square that by actually removing all of that, so everyone has nothing. How Labour that is, but surely the Conservative Party could do it the other way around and level it up.
We could say that. I mean, we, the Adam Smith Institute, are a big fan of a land value tax, which I think is a separate conversation. It's something Adam Smith was talking about way back when he published his Wealth of Nations in 1776. And given it's his 300th birthday this year, happy birthday, Adam, it's something I think we should renew our conversations about. But regarding Labour's policy, it is quite heavy on the taxation. And I think it's surprising that they've come. This is the only real thing of clarity that they haven't U-turned on. Yet, since we've seen this kind of next election push. So I think let's keep an eye on what Rachel Reeves has to say, because there may be a U-turn coming down on this one, like there was with adding VAT to private schools or independent schools. But the Conservatives really need to be ambitious, and we're just not seeing any ambition from Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt.
Maxwell, really good to talk to you. Thank you. Maxwell Marlow, their Director of Research at the Adam Smith Institute, and happy birthday to Adam Smith.